So this HOA treasurer parked her $60,000 BMW in my garage without asking, then fined me $200 for leaving my garage door open overnight. I dragged myself home after a 12-hour electrical shift, work boots crunching on gravel, and there's her pearl white luxury SUV dead center where my tools belong. Smell of her fancy leather mixing with motor oil, car alarm shrieking, and when I ask her to move, she waves fake emergency parking rules and tells me to learn community cooperation. 6 weeks later, I owned her house, and she was sobbing into my voicemail, begging me not to foreclose, while the whole neighborhood watched. But before I reveal exactly how her illegal power grab destroyed her financially, tell me, have you been steamrolled by some petty authority figure just because they could? Drop your location below. I want to see how many of us are done being pushed around. My name's Jake Morrison, and 2 years ago, I thought buying my first house in Willowbrook Estates was hitting the jackpot. I'm a 34-year-old electrician, single dad to 8-year-old Emma, who stays with me every other weekend. 6 years of saving every overtime penny, eating ramen like fine dining, all for a modest 3-bedroom with the real prize, a 2-car garage I could turn into my workshop. That garage was my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust mixing with copper wire, my grandfather's weathered workbench with tools that actually built America, and space to create Emma's treehouse without some neighbor measuring my property lines. Recently inherited a small sum from Grandpa too, finally had money for real home improvements, instead of just dreaming about them. The garage door opener had this satisfying mechanical rumble when it closed each evening, sealing off my world from the suburban theater outside. Willowbrook looked perfect. Middle-class homes built 2015 to 2018, young families, retirees, $180 monthly HOA for basic upkeep. Simple rules, I figured. Keep your lawn neat, don't paint your house neon, work hard, and mind your own business. Then I met Brenda Whitfield and learned that simple was never part of her vocabulary. Brenda's 52, drives that $60K BMW like it's a weapon, lives in the corner McMansion with the circular driveway that screams, "Bow before my superiority." She's HOA treasurer, which apparently translates to supreme dictator of suburban perfection. Her husband Brad works city planning, a fact she weaponizes in every conversation like verbal ammunition. Picture this. Always perfectly coiffed, designer everything, with a smile that could make Arctic ice feel warm by comparison. The kind of woman who measures your grass height while pretending to exercise her designer purse dog. My first Brenda encounter happened 6 months after moving in. I was installing safety lighting for elderly Mrs. Chen, helping her feel secure after neighborhood break-ins, when suddenly there's this shadow looming over my work. Sharp click of expensive heels on concrete. Overwhelming cloud of perfume that probably cost more than my truck payment. "Excuse me," clipboard clutched like divine scripture, "but I don't see permits posted for this electrical work." I explained outdoor lighting doesn't need permits, showed my state license, offered to review safety codes. Her response? "I'll need to verify that with my husband. We simply cannot have questionable contractors compromising our property values." The way she said questionable contractors, like my 12 years of licensed experience and calloused hands meant nothing because I drove a work truck instead of leasing German luxury. That bitter metallic taste of being dismissed, that was my official welcome to Brenda's neighborhood. Over 18 months, she transformed suburban watchdogging into performance art. Dawn Patrol with her violation notebook, documenting infractions like children's bikes on driveways or trash cans retrieved 11 minutes late. Woman made HOA enforcement her personal crusade against anyone who actually worked for a living, but her special treatment was reserved for residents who didn't match her community vision. Mrs. Chen got cited for aesthetically inappropriate decorations, her late veteran husband's memorial wind chimes. Tom Rodriguez faced fines for parking his work truck in his own driveway because commercial vehicles degrade residential character. The sound of Brenda's heels clicking became our neighborhood early warning system. Kids scattered like startled birds, window blinds twitched nervously. Everyone held their breath, hoping she'd pass without stopping to measure something with her little ruler. Emma, with that devastating 8-year-old honesty, once asked why the mean pretty lady always looks like she smelled something yucky out of the mouths of babes. I flew under her radar mostly, following every microscopic regulation, trimming grass to precisely 2.75 inches, parking my work van on the street to avoid giving her ammunition. But that Tuesday evening when I came home exhausted from a 12-hour job, I discovered Brenda had decided my garage was apparently community property. That Tuesday evening, I pulled into my driveway at 7:30 p.m. after installing emergency backup power for a medical clinic, one of those jobs where lives literally depend on your work being perfect. My steel-toed boots felt like concrete blocks, my tool belt had left permanent grooves in my shoulders, and all I wanted was to grab a beer and check on the treehouse project I'd been building for Emma. Instead, I found Brenda Whitfield's pearl-white BMW X5 parked dead center in my garage like she owned the place, not partially blocking. Not squeezed to one side, dead center with maybe 6 inches clearance on each side, positioned so perfectly that opening her doors would scratch my workbench. The smell of her car's leather interior mixed with my motor oil and sawdust, creating this weird clash of luxury and honest work that made my stomach turn. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, garage door remote in my hand, wondering if I was having some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination. The car alarm chirped once, that smug little electronic sound that said, "I belong here and you don't." Antagonist action. I walked around to my front door where I found Brenda herself sitting in one of my patio chairs like she was hosting a neighborhood committee meeting. She was perfectly dressed, despite the humid August evening, scrolling through her phone with the casual indifference of someone who'd never questioned her right to occupy any space she chose. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice level, "but there's a car in my garage." She looked up with that practiced smile. "Oh, Jake, my driveway is being sealed tomorrow morning, emergency situation, and the HOA emergency parking clause allows temporary use of available spaces during community maintenance." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the HOA documents while she watched with amusement, like I was a child trying to read a grown-up book. "Ma'am, I don't see any emergency parking clause in here." "Well," she stood up, smoothing her skirt, "I'm currently reviewing the bylaws for necessary updates. Consider this a pilot program for community cooperation during infrastructure improvements." Protagonist counterpunch. Here's where most people would have lost their temper and done something stupid. But 12 years of electrical work teaches you patience. One wrong move and you're dead. So instead of exploding, I did something that clearly wasn't in Brenda's playbook. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So to be clear," I said calmly, "you're admitting that this emergency parking clause doesn't actually exist yet and you're using my private garage as a test case without my permission?" Her face went from smug to panicked in about 2 seconds. "You can't record me without consent." "Actually, I can. We're on my property, and this is a one-party consent state." Knowledge nugget. In most states, you can legally record conversations on your own property without the other party's permission. Essential for documenting harassment. Takeaway. Always check your state's recording laws before dealing with aggressive neighbors. She tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. "Brad will hear about this?" "Good. I'd love to hear the city planning department's official position on fake HOA clauses." Mini twist. Her escalation. But Brenda wasn't done. The next morning, I found an official HOA violation notice taped to my front door. Failure to maintain community standards. Garage left open overnight, creating visual blight. Fine, $75, escalating to $200 if not resolved within 48 hours. There was a handwritten note attached. "Maybe next time you'll be more cooperative." B, I called my buddy Derek, college roommate turned real estate attorney, while staring at the notice. "Jake," Derek laughed after I read it to him, "she just handed you a gift. She's literally fining you for the violation she caused. That's evidence of harassment and abuse of HOA authority. So what's my next move?" Research time. HOA formation documents are public record at the county office. Find out what authority they actually have versus what they claim to have. During my lunch break, I drove to the county courthouse, the taste of institutional coffee mixed with the musty smell of old filing cabinets as I dug through incorporation papers. What I found made me smile for the first time since this started. Her second move. Meanwhile, Brenda was busy. I came home to find she'd emailed the entire neighborhood. Urgent community notice, resident violation creating security concerns due to unsecured garage overnight. Board reviewing enhanced enforcement procedures. Emma called that evening, excited about her upcoming weekend visit. "Daddy, is my treehouse going to be ready?" "We might have to work around some obstacles, sweetheart." "Is the mean lady being mean again?" "Yeah, baby. But Daddy's learning how to be mean back, the right way." What Emma didn't know was that my county research had revealed something Brenda definitely didn't want the neighborhood finding out about. Friday morning hit me with a new level of audacity, one that even I hadn't expected from Brenda. Not only was her BMW still sitting in my garage like some luxury parasite, But she'd brought a friend, a sleek black Mercedes sedan, now sitting beside it, taking up every inch of space where my tools used to be. I found my electrical supply cabinet, the one with $3,000 worth of equipment, pushed against the back wall with a brand new padlock, where my lock used to be. My tools were scattered across my workbench like someone had been rummaging through a junk drawer, and there was a sticky note on my grandfather's old vise, quote, "Temporary relocation for client staging, community cooperation appreciated, -BW, end quote." The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth, mixed with the sharp smell of expensive car leather and whatever fancy perfume she'd sprayed around my workspace, like she was marking her territory. Instead of doing what every fiber of my being wanted to do, which involved those bolt cutters hanging on my garage wall, I did something that would hurt Brenda more than any tool could. I called the non-emergency police line. "Hi, I'd like to report a trespassing situation and possible theft of personal property." Officer Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, a solid guy who looked like he'd dealt with plenty of suburban drama. After documenting everything with photos, he said something that made my day. "Sir, this looks like harassment to me. Mind if I have a word with the vehicle owner?" Watching Brenda try to explain to a cop why she had the right to lock up someone else's tools in their own garage was like watching a masterclass in how not to talk to police. Her voice got higher with each excuse. Her hands fluttered like confused birds, and Officer Martinez's expression grew more skeptical by the minute. The sound of his pen clicking as he took notes was like a countdown timer to Brenda's credibility evaporating. "Ma'am," he finally said, "property deed trumps HOA agreement every time. You might want to remove your vehicles before this becomes a criminal matter." That afternoon, I drove to the county surveyor's office with a mission. I remembered Derek mentioning once during our college days that property deeds always trump HOA plat maps in legal disputes. The deed describes exactly what you own, while HOA maps are often based on preliminary surveys that don't reflect final construction. Your deed is the ultimate legal authority over your property, not what any HOA claims on their maps. The clerk, a helpful woman named Janet, who'd clearly seen her share of property disputes, pulled up my lot survey with the enthusiasm of someone about to deliver Christmas morning news. "Oh, honey," she said, pointing at the screen, "you own 18 inches more toward the street than your HOA thinks you do. See this line here? That's your actual boundary. Your garage is completely on your own property." The original developer had sold me the property with clear title to the entire garage footprint, but the HOA's formation documents used an outdated preliminary survey. That was legally worthless. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd just found the cheat code to Brenda's game. By Saturday, Brenda had escalated to full neighborhood social media warfare. She called an, quote, "emergency," end quote, HOA board meeting for Monday night, with a notice that looked more like a court summons, quote, "urgent property boundary dispute requiring immediate resolution," end quote. She also launched a Facebook campaign that would make political operatives jealous. Her post about, quote, "some residents who prioritize vacation over community safety," end quote, got shared to 3 neighborhood groups. But her strategy backfired spectacularly. Mrs. Chen commented with a detailed account of Brenda's harassment campaign. Tom Rodriguez shared photos of his own bogus violation notices. Sarah Mitchell posted a screenshot of the actual HOA bylaws, proving most of Brenda's, quote, "rules," end quote, existed only in her imagination. My personal favorite comment came from Janet Martinez, Officer Martinez's wife, as it turned out. Quote, "funny how some people think badges give them the right to other people's property," with a rolling eyes emoji, end quote. Sunday morning brought Brenda's most desperate move yet. I woke up to find a city towing notice stuck to my work van. Apparently it violated, quote, "commercial vehicle restrictions," end quote, and would be towed Thursday morning. The beautiful irony? My van was parked legally on a public street, where I'd specifically put it to avoid any HOA issues, but Brenda's husband Brad had pulled strings at city planning to manufacture a violation that didn't exist. Emma called that evening, practically bouncing through the phone with excitement. "Daddy, can we work on my treehouse this weekend?" "Absolutely, sweetheart, and I think we might build it even bigger than we originally planned." "How come?" "Because Daddy learned something very interesting about our backyard. Turns out we own more of it than some people think we do." What I didn't tell Emma was that her innocent treehouse project was about to become the perfect demonstration. of exactly where my property lines really were, and who actually had the legal right to be there. Monday evening arrived with all the drama of a neighborhood soap opera. I walked into the Willowbrook Elementary cafeteria for the, quote, emergency, end quote, HOA meeting to find only 3 people sitting at a folding table that looked like it had been borrowed from a church basement sale. Brenda sat in the center wearing a navy blazer that screamed, quote, I'm in charge here, end quote. Flanking her were 2 board allies I'd never actually seen before, Harold something or other, a retiree who nodded at everything Brenda said like a dashboard bobblehead, and Patricia whoever, a woman who looked like she'd been professionally trained to purse her lips in disapproval. The cafeteria still smelled like today's lunch special, that unmistakable aroma of institutional mac and cheese mixed with industrial floor cleaner. It was about to smell a lot worse for Brenda. Where's everyone else? I asked, pulling out my phone to start recording. The other board members couldn't make it tonight, Brenda said with that practiced smile. But we have a quorum, so we can proceed with essential business. I sat down in one of those tiny plastic chairs designed for second graders, my knees practically touching my chin. The sound of the chair creaking under my weight echoed through the empty cafeteria like a warning shot. First order of business, she announced, motion to clarify parking enforcement procedures in light of recent non-compliance issues. She slid a typed document across the table, 3 pages of legal-sounding nonsense that basically said the HOA could fine anyone for anything related to, quote, vehicular storage creating visual disruption to community standards, end quote. The motion included retroactive fines for, quote, unauthorized garage usage patterns and, quote, dating back 60 days for $800. You're trying to fine me $800 for how I use my own garage? I asked. Community standards affect all property values, Harold bobbled enthusiastically. That's when I remembered something Derek had drilled into me during our college study sessions. Most HOA boards never file proper insurance for the powers they claim to have. Without insurance, individual board members become personally liable for any damages their decisions cause. Your insurance policy is your legal shield, but only if it actually covers what you're doing. I'd like to see the HOA incorporation documents, I said, and your insurance policy covering these enforcement powers. The silence that followed was so thick you could have carved it like Thanksgiving turkey. Patricia's lips pursed tighter. Brenda's smile faltered, and Harold stopped bobbling entirely. The fluorescent lights above us hummed like angry hornets trapped in a jar. Those documents are being reviewed by our legal counsel, Brenda finally managed. No problem, I said, pulling out the papers I'd brought. I've got copies right here from the county filing office. I spread out the HOA incorporation documents and insurance policy on the tiny table. Brenda's face went from confident pink to worried pale in about 3 seconds. According to your insurance policy, I continued, the HOA specifically excludes coverage for board members' personal business activities, like using community resources for real estate staging. Furthermore, I said, opening another folder, I've documented $23,000 in financial discrepancies over the past 18 months. The pattern was beautiful in its criminal simplicity. Storm cleanup billed to the HOA but performed by city crews for free. Landscape consultations charged to community funds but done through Brenda's private company. Emergency tree removal that cost us $8,400. For trees the city had removed at no charge. But here's what I hadn't expected to find, the real twist that made my electrician's heart sing. Mrs. Whitfield, I said, pulling out one final document, did you know your husband's city planning emails are subject to public records requests? The color drained from her face faster than water down a broken drain. I read from Brad's official email, quote, problem properties requiring community pressure to improve neighborhood composition. Target working-class homeowners for maximum leverage, end quote. Harold's mouth fell open like a broken garage door. Patricia actually gasped, and Brenda looked like someone had just told her the FBI was outside. That's taken out of context, she whispered. There's more, I said. Quote, wife's staging business needs 3-month access cycles. Recommend escalating HOA pressure on Morrison property for optimal client presentation timeline, end quote. The taste of victory was better than my grandfather's homemade apple pie, sweet with just a hint of justice. This meeting is over, Brenda said, standing so fast her chair fell backward with a metallic crash that echoed through the empty cafeteria. But as I walked to my car, I had no idea that Brenda's desperation was about to reach levels that would make tonight's revelations look like a friendly neighborhood chat. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. "Jake, you need to sit down for this," Derek said. His voice had that tone lawyers get when they've found something that could either make you rich or land someone in federal prison. I was in my kitchen, staring at my coffee maker and wondering if Brenda's BMW was still squatting in my garage. Spoiler alert, it was. "Remember how I said I'd dig deeper into Brenda's business dealings?" Derek continued. "Well, I found the smoking gun. Actually, I found the whole arsenal." He'd spent the night running Brenda's real estate license through the state database, along with cross-referencing her HOA financial activities with public records. What he discovered made my electrical violations look like parking tickets. "First," Derek said, "Brenda's real estate license has 2 pending complaints for misrepresentation, both from elderly clients who claim she manipulated them into selling below market value." The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling my kitchen with the rich aroma of caffeine salvation. I was going to need it. Second, her property records show she owes $180,000 more on her mortgage than her house is currently worth. She's underwater financially and drowning fast. But the real bombshell was still coming. Third, and this is the big one, Brad's city position is under official ethics review for undisclosed conflicts of interest related to HOA enforcement activities. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. The smooth ceramic surface suddenly felt slippery in my calloused hands. "Someone filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office," Derek continued, "about systematic corruption in municipal planning departments working with private HOA boards to manipulate property values." The investigation had been quietly running for 6 months. Brad's email trail was just the evidence they needed to prove coordination between city planning and private real estate interests, using HOA harassment to force property sales. "Derek," I said, "are you telling me that Brenda and Brad are part of some kind of organized scheme?" "I'm telling you that your little garage situation just became Exhibit A in a federal fraud investigation." The implications hit me like a surge through an ungrounded electrical line. Brenda wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor with control issues. She was running a sophisticated property manipulation scheme, using her HOA position to identify target homeowners, creating artificial violation pressure to force quick sales below market value, then flipping those properties through her real estate business for massive profits. "How many other homeowners?" I asked. "At least 12 in your neighborhood alone, probably dozens across the county." Derek explained how the scheme worked. Brad would identify properties in his city planning role that were ripe for development or resale. Brenda would manufacture HOA violations to pressure those specific homeowners into selling. Their combined inside knowledge of zoning changes and development plans made them incredibly effective at targeting the right properties at the right time. Mrs. Chen's memorial wind chimes weren't just annoying to Brenda's aesthetic sense. They were an excuse to pressure an elderly widow into selling her house 6 months before the city announced plans for a new community center that would boost property values by 30%. Tom Rodriguez's work truck wasn't really a community eyesore. It was parked on a lot that Brad knew would be rezoned for mixed-use development within 2 years. My garage wasn't just convenient parking for Brenda's staging business. My property sat on a corner lot that would become extremely valuable when the new shopping center got approved next spring. "The beautiful part," Derek said with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who just cracked a major case, "is that they documented everything. Brad's emails, Brenda's violation records, even invoices showing her staging company billing clients for access to properties she obtained through HOA pressure." So, what happens now? Now you have more power in this situation than Brenda could have ever imagined. She's not just facing HOA accountability anymore. She's looking at federal fraud charges, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. I hung up the phone and walked out to my garage, where Brenda's BMW still sat like a $40,000 confession letter. But now I understood something that changed my entire strategy. This wasn't about parking. This wasn't about property rights. This was about taking down a criminal enterprise that had been systematically stealing from working families across our entire county. Time to call in some bigger allies. Derek's revelation changed everything. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. This was organized crime disguised as suburban governance. And that meant I needed to think bigger than just getting my garage back. I spent Wednesday afternoon assembling what Derek called, quote, "team justice," end quote. Though honestly, it felt more like recruiting for the world's most suburban version of Ocean's 11. First up was Mrs. Chen. I found her in her garden, tending to the memorial flowers she'd planted around her late husband's wind chimes, the ones Brenda had tried to ban as, quote, "aesthetically inappropriate," end quote. Mrs. Chen, I said, how would you feel about helping me expose exactly what Brenda's been doing to this neighborhood? Her weathered hands paused over a rosebush that had been blooming for 40 years. Jake, I've been keeping records since the day that woman showed up at my door with her clipboard. I was hoping someone would eventually ask. She disappeared into her house and returned with a shoebox full of documentation that would make an FBI forensic accountant weep with joy. Every violation notice, every threatening phone call, every time Brenda had photographed her property without permission, all dated, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with neighborhood events. Military training, she explained with a smile that could have powered the neighborhood. My late husband taught me that documentation beats confrontation every time. Next was Tom Rodriguez. I found him in his driveway, working on the engine of that work truck Brenda had tried to get towed. The smell of motor oil and determination filled the evening air. Tom, I need someone with your kind of practical expertise. He looked up from under the hood, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen more honest work than Brenda's BMW. You mean someone who knows how to install security equipment without leaving fingerprints? I mean someone who understands how to document things properly. Tom's grin could have lit up the whole street. Brother, I've been waiting for this conversation since the day she tried to fine me for parking my own truck in my own driveway. Over the next hour, Tom explained his background in military intelligence, how he'd been quietly mapping Brenda's patrol patterns, recording her violation schedule, even documenting which houses she photographed and when. Turns out having a combat veteran with surveillance training living 2 streets over was like having a neighborhood guardian angel with a security clearance. Sarah Mitchell joined our impromptu war council when she showed up with her laptop, and the kind of organizational skills that come from managing 33rd graders every day. I've been running the neighborhood Facebook group like an intelligence operation, she said, pulling up spreadsheets that would impress a data analyst. Every complaint about Brenda, every suspicious HOA activity, every time someone got a bogus violation notice, all cross-referenced and categorized. Derek arrived Thursday evening with a legal strategy that was beautiful in its simplicity. We were going to let Brenda continue digging her own hole, while building an airtight case that would protect every homeowner in the county from similar schemes. First, Derek explained, spreading documents across my kitchen table, we file a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Board about Brenda's license violations, using Mrs. Chen's documentation. The complaint would trigger an automatic investigation into Brenda's business practices, including her use of HOA authority to manipulate property sales. Real estate boards take this kind of thing very seriously because it makes their entire industry look corrupt. Second, he continued, we submit Brad's email evidence to the State Attorney General's office. They're already investigating municipal corruption. This gives them everything they need to prove conspiracy. Derek had learned from his prosecutor friends that the key to taking down corruption networks is patience. Let them think they're winning while you build overwhelming evidence. Make them confident enough to keep committing crimes while you're recording everything. Third, we prepare a civil lawsuit under federal civil rights statutes, property deprivation, conspiracy to violate civil rights, pattern of harassment targeting specific demographic groups. The civil rights angle was crucial. Brenda hadn't just been randomly harassing homeowners. She'd been systematically targeting working-class families, elderly residents, and anyone who didn't fit her vision of, quote, appropriate neighborhood composition, end quote. But the real masterstroke was Derek's final suggestion. We're going to use your vacation time. I stared at him like he'd suggested I take up professional alligator wrestling. Think about it, Derek said. Narcissistic personalities like Brenda need constant control. They can't handle situations they can't manipulate. What happens if you just disappear for a couple weeks? The plan was elegantly simple. I'd take my accumulated vacation time and go camping with Emma, completely off the grid. No cell service, no internet, no way for Brenda to contact or manipulate me. Meanwhile, Tom would house sit and document every single thing Brenda did. Mrs. Chen would coordinate with other neighbors to record any escalating behavior. Sarah would monitor social media and keep the neighborhood informed. Without you there to react to, Derek explained, she'll have to show her true colors to everyone else. Narcissists can't help themselves when they think they're winning. The taste of anticipation was like the first bite of perfectly grilled barbecue. This was going to be satisfying in ways Brenda couldn't even imagine. Emma's weekend visit was coming up, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I was genuinely excited to tell her we were going camping. For 2 weeks of the most strategic relaxation of my life. Day 3 of our Yellowstone camping trip, and I was teaching Emma how to identify animal tracks by the creek when my satellite emergency communicator buzzed with a message from Tom. Quote, "She's lost her mind. Call when you can get signal." End quote. Emma was building a dam out of smooth river rocks, completely absorbed in her engineering project. The smell of pine needles and mountain air should have been relaxing. Instead, I found myself hiking to higher ground to get cell coverage, wondering what fresh hell Brenda had unleashed on the neighborhood. Tom answered on the first ring. "Jake, brother, this woman is unhinged. Day 1, she tried to get into your garage at 6 a.m. with a crowbar. I sat down on a boulder that had probably been there since the last ice age, watching eagles circle overhead while Tom described Brenda's escalating desperation. Day 2, she called a locksmith, claimed it was an HOA emergency inspection for electrical hazards. Locksmith took one look at her story and left. But here's the good part. I got it all on video. Tom had positioned cameras to cover every angle of my property, motion activated, infrared capable, uploading to cloud storage that Brenda couldn't tamper with. Military-grade surveillance disguised as standard home security. Day 3, that's today. She brought City Electrical Inspector Frank Morrison, no relation to you, by the way, told him you had dangerous wiring that needed immediate inspection. The beautiful thing about working in the electrical trade for 12 years is that you know every inspector in the county. Frank Morrison was a straight shooter who didn't appreciate being lied to about emergency situations. Frank took one look at her story and asked for the complaint filing number, Tom continued. When she couldn't provide one, he asked who reported the electrical hazard. When she said she did, he asked for her electrical license number. I could picture Brenda's face when she realized she'd just claimed expertise she didn't have to a man who'd been inspecting electrical work since before she got her real estate license. Frank told her that filing false electrical emergency reports was a misdemeanor. Then he left, but not before he gave me his card and said to call if she tried anything else. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying the sound of Emma's laughter as she tested her rock dam against the creek current. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Brenda was apparently having a complete meltdown. But Jake, that's not even the worst part. Tom's voice dropped to that tone military guys use when they're about to describe something truly spectacular. Last night, around midnight, she tried to jimmy your garage lock with what looked like a butter knife. I confronted her, and she claimed she heard, quote, strange noises and was investigating community safety concerns, end quote. Please tell me you recorded that. Brother, I got her on camera attempting breaking and entering while explaining to a Marine veteran how community safety works. It's like watching someone fail a sobriety test while insisting they're the designated driver. Tom had filed a police report for attempted burglary. Officer Martinez took one look at the security footage and recommended that Brenda speak with a lawyer immediately. But her response to getting caught red-handed was even more revealing. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group at 2 a.m., Tom said. Quote, "Some residents think vacation planning is more important than community safety. Dangerous electrical situations require immediate attention regardless of individual convenience." End quote. Sarah Mitchell had screenshot everything before Brenda could delete it. The 2 a.m. timestamp made it clear that she'd posted immediately after getting caught trying to break into my garage. The neighbors are turning against her, Tom continued. Mrs. Patterson from Oak Street commented that maybe people who break into garages at midnight aren't the best judges of community safety. Got 47 likes in 6 hours. Derek had called that morning with updates from the legal front. The State Real Estate Board had fast-tracked their investigation after receiving Mrs. Chen's documentation. Brad's city position was now under active review by the Ethics Committee, and the Attorney General's office was very interested in Brad's email trail. One more thing, Tom said. She tried to bribe me yesterday. That got my full attention. Eagles could circle all they wanted. This was better than nature documentary. $500 cash, just to let her into your garage for, quote, 1 hour to retrieve important staging materials, end quote. I told her those staging materials looked suspiciously like your electrical tools. Tom had recorded the entire conversation on his phone, including Brenda's exact words about making my city permit applications, quote, much easier if we cooperate, end quote. Emma called from the creek, excited about a fish she'd spotted in her rock pool. Her voice echoed off the mountain walls like a reminder of what really mattered. Clean air, clear water, and time with people you love. While 200 miles away, a corrupt HOA treasurer was systematically destroying her own life, trying to steal a garage that was never hers to begin with. Tom, I said, keep recording everything. I have a feeling she's just getting started. Day 9 of our camping trip, and Emma had just caught her first fish when my satellite communicator buzzed again. This time it was Sarah's number with an urgent message. Quote, "Emergency. Brenda hired someone to break in. Police involved. Call ASAP." End quote. I helped Emma release her rainbow trout back into the crystal-clear mountain stream, watching it dart away toward deeper water. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were practicing catch and release while Brenda was apparently escalating to actual crime. Sarah answered before the first ring finished. "Jake, she's completely lost it. Yesterday she approached Tom with a briefcase full of cash. Today she hired what can only be described as the world's worst burglar." The mountain silence was broken only by the sound of wind through pine trees and my blood pressure climbing toward dangerous levels. Around 2 p.m. today, Tom spotted some guy with bolt cutters trying to cut your garage lock. When Tom confronted him, the guy claimed to be a, quote, "licensed contractor working for the HOA," end quote. "No permit, no ID, no legitimate paperwork." I could hear the satisfaction in Sarah's voice as she described what happened next. Tom asked to see his contractor's license. Guy couldn't produce one. Tom asked for the HOA work order. Guy pulled out a handwritten note on Brenda's personal letterhead. Tom called the police. Officer Martinez arrived to find a man with no identification attempting to break into private property with tools that belonged in a prison escape movie. When pressed about who hired him, the guy immediately gave up Brenda's name and phone number. "Gets better," Sarah continued. Under questioning, he admitted Brenda paid him $200 cash to, quote, "retrieve staging materials from a garage that needed to be accessed for community safety," end quote. The criminal conspiracy charges were adding up faster than Emma's collection of interesting rocks. Attempted burglary, conspiracy to commit breaking and entering, filing false reports, and now soliciting criminal activity. But Jake, the nuclear bomb dropped this morning. Sarah's voice had that tone teachers get when they're about to describe the most spectacular classroom disaster of their career. The state attorney general's office executed a search warrant on Brenda's house and real estate office at 6 a.m. with news cameras rolling. I sat down on a fallen log watching Emma skip stones across the lake while trying to process the fact that my neighborhood HOA drama had apparently escalated to federal law enforcement. Channel 7 was there for the whole thing, Sarah said. Brenda in her bathrobe screaming about property rights while they carried out boxes of financial records. Brad getting arrested in his city planning office while his coworkers watched through conference room windows. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected. Derek's evidence package, combined with Mrs. Chen's meticulous documentation and Tom's security footage, had given prosecutors everything they needed for search warrants. They found everything, Jake. Computer files showing the property manipulation scheme, bank records proving she'd been moving HOA funds through her personal accounts, even a spreadsheet listing target homeowners with notes about, quote, "pressure points for maximum compliance," end quote. Mrs. Chen's name was on that list with notes about, quote, "elderly widow, vulnerable to safety concerns," end quote. Tom's entry mentioned, quote, "working-class Hispanic, likely to avoid legal confrontation," end quote. My file was the most detailed. Quote, "single father, electrician, corner lot, high development potential, financial pressure through daughter's needs," end quote. The casual racism and classism documented in Brenda's own handwriting was going to make the civil rights case slam dunk simple. "There's more," Sarah said. They arrested 4 other HOA board members across the county. This wasn't just Willowbrook. This was organized crime using suburban homeowner associations as cover. The scope was staggering. Dozens of neighborhoods, hundreds of manipulated property sales, millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions spanning 5 years. "Derek called this morning," Sarah continued. "The Attorney General's office wants to interview you when you get back, as a witness, not a suspect. You're officially the victim who exposed a federal conspiracy." Emma ran up with a perfect skipping stone, smooth and flat like a tiny pancake. "Daddy, look what I found. Want to see how far it goes?" "Absolutely, sweetheart." While she demonstrated her improved stone skipping technique, Sarah delivered the final update. "Oh, and Jake? Brenda called you 17 times yesterday. The voicemails. There's something special." 17 times? Started demanding, moved to pleading, ended with full sobbing breakdown. She's begging you not to press charges, offering to drop all HOA claims, even promising to buy your house for above market value if you'll just, quote, "make this all go away," end quote. The mountain lake was mirror smooth, reflecting Emma's delighted face as her stone skipped 7 times before sinking. Pure joy in a place where the air was clean and people couldn't lie to you about fake parking regulations. Sarah, I said, save those voicemails. I have a feeling they're going to be very useful when we get home. Because in 3 days, Emma and I would be heading back to Willowbrook, where a federal investigation was waiting for us, and where Brenda's empire had finally collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. Day 14. Homecoming Day. Emma and I drove back into Willowbrook Estates to find our quiet suburban street transformed into something that looked like a cross between a news event and a block party. 3 news vans lined the curb, neighbors stood in clusters, talking and pointing, and there, in the middle of it all, was my house, with police tape still fluttering around Brenda's abandoned BMW. "Daddy, why are there so many people?" Emma asked, pressing her face to the car window. "Because sometimes when you stand up to bullies, other people pay attention." Tom met us in my driveway with a grin that could have powered the neighborhood and a folder thick enough to use as a weapon. "Welcome home, brother. Hope you're ready for your close-up." He handed me the folder while Emma ran to inspect her treehouse in progress. The documentation inside was beautiful. 17 attempts at breaking into my garage, 3 police reports, 1 arrest, and enough security footage to make a Netflix documentary. "Channel 7 wants to interview you in an hour," Tom said. Something about, quote, "the homeowner who exposed HOA corruption through strategic vacation planning," end quote. The interview setup was in Mrs. Chen's front yard, with my garage visible in the background. Producer wanted the visual of Brenda's BMW still sitting there like a $40,000 confession letter. 2 weeks of abandonment had not been kind to German luxury engineering. Detective Sarah Rodriguez, no relation to our neighbor Tom, arrived first to walk me through the criminal case timeline. Professional, thorough, and clearly enjoying the fact that a civilian had handed her a federal conspiracy case with a bow on top. "Mr. Morrison, your strategic documentation and the evidence gathered by your neighbors has resulted in charges against 14 individuals across 6 counties. This is the largest HOA fraud case in state history." She explained how the investigation had expanded beyond Brenda and Brad. The property manipulation scheme involved city planners, real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and HOA board members working together to systematically defraud homeowners. "Your garage situation was small potatoes compared to what we found, but it was the thread that unraveled everything." At 5 p.m., neighbors started gathering for what Sarah Mitchell had organized as a, quote, "community accountability meeting," end quote. The Willowbrook Elementary cafeteria was packed with 47 families, local media, and enough righteous anger to power a small city. Derek arrived with updates that sounded like something from a legal thriller. Brenda's real estate license had been permanently revoked. Brad had been terminated from city planning and banned from municipal employment. Their house was in foreclosure, and both were facing federal fraud charges with potential 20-year sentences. "But here's the beautiful part," Derek said, speaking to the crowd. "The civil settlement includes funding for a community legal defense fund. Any homeowner who faces HOA harassment can get free legal consultation." The applause was thunderous. Mrs. Chen stood up with tears in her eyes, holding a framed photo of her late husband. "My Henry served 3 tours defending democracy. He would have loved seeing it work right here in our neighborhood." Tom Rodriguez took the microphone next, his military bearing commanding instant respect. "What Jake did wasn't just stand up for himself. He stood up for all of us. Every working family who's been told we don't belong in our own neighborhoods." But the real mic drop moment came when they played Brenda's voicemails on the community speakers. 17 messages spanning 2 weeks, starting with demands, quote, "You need to return immediately and resolve this garage situation," end quote, escalating to threats, quote, "My husband's position gives us options you haven't considered," end quote, moving to bargaining, quote, "I'll drop all HOA violations if you just let me explain," end quote, and ending with complete breakdown, quote, "Please, Jake, I'm begging you. I'll pay above market value for your house. Just don't let them take everything," end quote. The gasps from the audience when they heard her admission of attempted bribery were audible, but the moment that brought the house down was her final message, recorded at 3 a.m. on day 12. Quote, "I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to control something. Everything's falling apart. And I thought if I could just make the neighborhood perfect, maybe Brad would stop drinking and we could save our marriage and I could stop feeling like such a failure," end quote. The raw desperation in her voice was almost tragic. Almost. Officer Martinez stood up from the back of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, justice isn't always pretty, but it's necessary." Channel 7's reporter asked me for a final comment. With 47 neighbors watching, cameras rolling, and my daughter building block towers in the back of the room, I said the only thing that mattered. All I wanted was to use my own garage. Turns out that sometimes defending small things leads to protecting big things, like the right to exist in your own neighborhood without someone else's permission. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Emma clapped so hard her little hands turned red. And somewhere across town, Brenda Whitfield was learning that karma doesn't take vacation days. 6 months later, and Emma's treehouse was finally finished. We built it exactly 18 inches past where Brenda had claimed my property line ended. Because when you own the land, you might as well use every inch of it. Emma was hanging upside down from her new rope ladder, her hair swinging like a pendulum while she explained the treehouse rules to her friend Madison from down the street. First rule, she announced with the authority of an 8-year-old architect. No mean people allowed. Second rule, everyone has to share snacks. Third rule, if you're mean to someone's daddy, you can't come up here ever. Smart kid. She'd learned more about property rights and community justice from this whole experience than most adults understand. The civil lawsuit settlement had been finalized last week. $12,000 plus legal fees paid out of the insurance policy that covered HOA board misconduct. Derek had been right about individual liability. Board members who operate outside their authority become personally responsible for damages. But I didn't keep the money. Instead, I used it to establish the Willowbrook Property Rights Defense Fund. $12,000 in seed money, plus Derek volunteering pro bono hours, plus Mrs. Chen serving as community ombudsman for elderly residents. Any homeowner facing HOA harassment could get free legal consultation and representation. The fund helped 3 families in the first month alone. Turned out Brenda's methods had been copied by power-hungry board members in other neighborhoods. But now word was spreading. Mess with working families. And there are people who know how to fight back. Mrs. Chen had become something of a neighborhood celebrity. Her documentation methods were so thorough that 2 other counties asked her to train their residents in proper record-keeping for HOA accountability. She started calling it her, quote, Democracy in Action Workshop. Tom Rodriguez got elected to the new HOA board on a platform of transparency and common sense. First order of business was posting all financial records online for public review. Second was establishing a policy that board members couldn't profit from their positions in any way. Property values in Willowbrook had actually increased 8% since the corruption was exposed. Turns out people pay premium prices for neighborhoods where you don't have to worry about arbitrary harassment from petty dictators. Sarah Mitchell started a YouTube channel called, quote, HOA Accountability Network, end quote, teaching homeowners how to research their rights, document violations, and build coalitions for community protection. Her subscriber count hit 50,000 last month. Derek's law practice got so many HOA corruption cases that he hired 2 associates and started specializing in homeowner protection law. He jokes that my garage situation was the best marketing campaign he never paid for. Emma's relationship with me had grown stronger through the whole experience. She'd learned that sometimes adults need to stand up to bullies too, and that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Daddy, she said one evening while we were grilling burgers in the backyard, are you proud of what we did? I'm proud of what you did, sweetheart. You were patient while Daddy learned how to be brave. Can we go camping again this summer? Absolutely, but this time, just for fun. The annual, quote, Garage Door Day barbecue had become a neighborhood tradition. Every August we celebrate the day ordinary people proved that corrupt authority doesn't get the last word. Kids draw chalk art about brave neighbors. Adults share property improvement projects without fear. And everyone remembers that democracy works best when citizens pay attention. Brenda and Brad both pled guilty to federal fraud charges. She got 18 months in minimum security prison. He got 2 years and permanent ban from government employment. Their house sold at auction for 60% of its previous value. Karma, as it turns out, is very expensive. But here's the thing I want you to remember. This story started with one woman parking in one man's garage without permission. It ended with federal investigations, criminal convictions, and protection for hundreds of families across multiple counties. Sometimes the biggest changes start with defending the smallest spaces. So here's my challenge for you. Share your own HOA nightmare story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in fighting back against petty tyrants who think badges give them the right to run other people's lives. And subscribe and ring that bell, because next week I'm telling you about the time a city inspector tried to condemn someone's house for having too many books. And how one librarian fought back with a law nobody knew existed, because bullies only win when good people stay quiet, and Emma's treehouse rules still apply. No mean people allowed.